Of all the different things that I could say to you on a Wednesday afternoon, one of the things that I wish I could say with a degree of certainty and absolute assurance is that I am going to teach you on this day, in this place, the greatest and most important secret to life. I can't, because I'm not quite sure I know exactly what that is. But if I did, I think I might tell you that the secret of life is a hammer. Welcome to the LunchBox Devotions. I'm Pastor Russ Yoke, and thank you for spending some lunchtime with me. Now, when I say the secret to life is a hammer, I don't mean that in the literal sense that if you go and buy yourself the right hammer at Lowe's, that's going to make everything better. Although I will say having the right tools for the job, whatever the job might happen to be, is going to make your life easier. When I was a kid, I used to spend a lot of time in my grandfather's workshop, and he had a lot of tools and a lot of sharp, pointy objects and heavy, blunt objects and dangerous, spinning, powerful electrical objects. And my grandfather, being the adventurous soul that he was, he let me play with almost all of them. In fact, that was one of my favorite things to do when I was a kid, was to go into my grandfather's workshop, and he would hand me a chunk of wood, usually something that he'd cut off of something else that he was working on. I was the guy that got the scraps. And he might hand me a hammer and a box of nails and just say, "Go at it, kid." He might give me a plane or a chisel and a hammer and just tell me to have fun with it. I have all 10 of my fingers, so nothing too terrible ever happened. I will say I whacked my thumb more times probably than I really want to talk about or think about, even for that matter. But I'll tell you this much. I know how to drive a nail. I know how to screw a screw. I can do a lot of pretty decent basic carpentry stuff. And it was because I spent time experimenting in my grandfather's workshop. It was not a complex workshop. He didn't have state-of-the-art equipment, although he had a lathe. And let me tell you what, if you've never played with a lathe, find the opportunity to do it. It is so fun. But what he did have was a knowledge of how to use the tools. Now, as I've grown, tools have grown with me. And so you can go to Lowe's and purchase any number of incredibly high-tech pieces of tool technology, things that are quote-unquote labor-saving. I don't know that that's always true. We have exchanged a sanding block for a power sander. We have exchanged a plain old screwdriver for a power screwdriver. We have exchanged a good old hand-cranked wood drill. I don't know if you remember hand-cranked wood drills. We had those when I was a kid. For, of course, electric cordless power drills. The world has gotten far more complicated. Our tools have gotten more advanced. And one of the shortcomings that we human beings have in our very narrow and limited understanding of life is that we believe that as our tools have become more sophisticated, that by necessity means so have we. Let me tell you what, in my experience, that is very far from the truth. The author of the book Ecclesiastes, which is often attributed to King Solomon and was written by the scribe Kohelet, begins in the first chapter, going back down to verse 9, with the author saying, "What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, 'Look, this is something new. It was here already long ago. It was here before our time.' No one remembers the former generations, even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them." Here ends our reading. Now, aside from being more than a little dreary, the book of Ecclesiastes has a wealth of wisdom and knowledge about human nature. Probably that's why it's a little dreary. Human nature is itself something of a dreary thing. If I said to you that there was a political party forming for the sole and express purpose of propagating and supporting candidates who would support removing masks in public spaces and removing the requirement to wear a mask in public spaces, a lot of you would probably shrug your shoulders and say, yeah, I could see that happening. People are crazy. It's a new time. It's a different time where we're working in this very unknown territory. But if I told you that that political party actually formed in 1918, and that it was specifically designed to support political candidates in the state of California who would not support wearing masks in public, or at least requiring people to do so during the Spanish influenza outbreak of 1918-1919, you might start to get the picture of what it is that I'm talking about, and what it is that our author here in the book of Ecclesiastes is talking about. It doesn't matter how new our tools, whether our tools are hammers or whether our tools are Twitter and Facebook, human beings make fundamentally the same decisions and fundamentally the same mistakes and the same successes, regardless of the tools you hand us. We're just not that sophisticated when it comes to our own personal evolution as thinking beings. Our tools evolve, our skills to use those tools adapt to the tools that we have created. But what makes us human, what makes us fundamentally people under the surface of all of that tool usage, it really does not change. So when the author of Ecclesiastes says, you know, is there anything of which one can say, look, here's something new? It was already there long ago. It was here before our time. This is an important thing for us to understand as we look at the world that we live in. The problems that we face, the things that we encounter, the situations that we're facing, these aren't novel. Humans have faced exactly these problems over and over again. Do you realize that Martin Luther once had to write a letter to the churches in Saxony instructing people on how to deal with a pandemic? And do you know what he told them to do? He told them, stay in your homes, avoid contact with other people if you can manage it, help your neighbors if they need help, go out if you have to go out, wear a mask if you can, avoid public spaces, and, you know, try to do your best to keep your neighbors safe until this pandemic has passed. That was 500 years ago. It might as well be the CDC instructions on social distancing. Part of the problem is we human beings believe that in all of our complexity of tools and all of our complexity of social structures, that we are in fact somehow ourselves more complicated creatures than we have ever been, when in fact we're not. We're functionally the same creatures we were 500 years ago when Martin Luther wrote that letter, the same creatures we were several hundred, if not thousands of years ago when Ecclesiastes was written. We are basically the same creatures. And we have the same God who provides us with the same answers, the same comfort, the same hope, the same promise of his presence. We trick ourselves into thinking that we live in extreme times where no one has ever faced the sort of problems we face. Well, yeah, they have. They just didn't have as good of tools as we did. Some of those tools including the ability to have tools that enable us to talk at length about our problems. But we have the same God who offers us the same hope, the same peace, the same presence, the same certainty that he walks with us through any tragedy and trial, and that we are never alone. Some things never change. Humans don't change, but God doesn't change. Nor does God's love, nor does God's mercy, nor does God's grace. And that we hold on to. Well, thank you all for having lunch with me. I've been Pastor Russ Yoke, and this has been LunchBox Devotions. We hope to see you next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. God bless.